All right. Good morning, everybody, to our Forum on Race. Welcome to those of you who have stayed on to the live stream and just continuing on. And welcome to any of you out there who've just joined right now for the Forum on Race. We're glad you're here. And I'm just going to begin with some introductory comments before we hear from our participants. I wanted to begin with a definition of racism. A definition of racism, since we're going to be talking about race. And this comes from Beverly Daniel Tatum. And she refers to racism as a system of oppression based on race. A system of oppression based on race. And that really has two parts. There's the individual part, where there may be malicious words or actions of an individual spoken or acted out against another individual, a one-to-one expression of racism, or it could be an impersonal system, systemic racism. And that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. That's what I refer to when I talk about racism, a system of oppression based upon race. Next, I want to mention what Jemar Tisby in his book, The Color of Compromise, calls the arc of racial justice. The arc of racial justice, A-R-C. And the A is awareness. Becoming aware of racial issues, becoming aware of racism. And that's what this forum is all about. This forum is designed to increase our awareness of racism. Hopefully that will then carry over into relationships where we build genuine, sincere, authentic relationships with people of color. And then hopefully that will lead to a commitment to change, to address the issues of social injustice in our societies, the systemic kinds of things. And I think Jemar Tisby's arc of racial justice from awareness to relationship to commitment to change is something that I've appreciated. It's a good thing to keep in mind. Our goals today are pretty simple. We just want to help to increase everybody's understanding of racism. We're going to give you an opportunity to ask some questions. You can start texting me questions on my phone. Hopefully right now you'll see my phone number that'll go up, 503-886-9180. Text me your questions, and there'll be a time in the forum where those questions will be asked, as many as we can get to. Then we're going to learn some practical steps that we can take to address racism. And all of this is just done really to express our belief in the basic dignity and equality of all human beings, regardless of race. So I want to introduce our members to you. We have 3 people who are part of this forum this morning. You can only see 2 of them. The third one, Emil Kuda, came in contact with COVID this week, so he is home quarantining himself. But Emil, are you there?
I am, yeah.
So you're going to be able to, I think you'll be able to hear and see Emil on the live stream. He's still going to join us, but he's joining us from home this morning. So Emil is married to Erin. They have 2 kids. Titus and River, and Emil was born in Iran, and he's Iranian and Iraqi, and came to our country as a refugee. Now he's a U.S. citizen. So Emil, thank you very much for being willing to be a part of this morning. And then Marilyn Greenleaf, many, if not all of you know Marilyn. She's married to Will, mother to Joshua. Marilyn grew up in Belize, which is a Caribbean country on the northeast part of Central America. And that's where Marilyn's roots are at. And then we're very, very glad to have Melinda Buckles with us this morning. Melinda is a Canby resident. She grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. As an early adult, ended up moving to Oregon and has stayed here. She's a mother to 3 children. And she's married to Ken Buckles. Many of you know Ken from our community, and they just celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary this week. So congratulations. if Facebook doesn't lie. So there you go. Anyway, we're very, very thankful for the three that have been willing to speak this morning and share with us. And so what we're going to do are three things. We're going to start out, give each of the participants an opportunity to share a little bit about their background, and then 2 or 3 experiences, stories where they've experienced racism. So that'll take a little bit of time to do that. And then from there, we will go into a question and answer time. And then from there, we'll wrap it up with each of our participants sharing some practical ways that we can begin to address racism. So we're going to begin with Marilyn Greenleaf, and she's just going to share a little bit of her background and her experiences with racism. So Marilyn, you're on.
I just want to say thank you for being willing to listen and wanting to understand. It means quite a lot because there's so many things that happen under the radar that sometimes people are not aware how it affects others and people of other culture. There's so many injustice that happens sometimes that it becomes kind of normal, like an earthquake. The big tremor comes and that's noticeable, but little tremors just go unnoticed. I grew up, I lived in Seattle, I've lived in California, and I've lived here now in Oregon. And I come here at Canby Alliance Church, where I worship with my husband. And when I came here, sometimes I have people of color. We like to worship with other people of colors around us in our community, in our church, because we can look at each other and we just send a message of comfort, of warmth, of acceptance that maybe others don't get. And to be a single black woman or only black person in a church that's all white could be very, very sometimes not intimidating if my mind is not focused on the Lord, is not set on the Lord. It's just wonderful. I could talk about many experiences, but because you want to listen, I felt like I would use some practical experience here that maybe you don't recognize or see. I said, right here at CAC, I can give some examples, but to tell them would hurt people, and that's not my intention. I'm not someone to hold a grudge or hold on to things, but I'll tell you my first talk with Joshua. He was about 3 years old, or maybe not even quite 3 years old. I picked him up from the nursery here at CSC, and the person that was standing behind me just kept rolling their eyes over and over continually to the person that was assisting at the nursery. And I was thinking, I don't normally talk to this person. I don't normally say anything to them. Sometimes we pass each other like ship in the night in the hallway. And I was like, what could I have done? Well, what for me as a black person, and then if I should ask you, if you were the only white person in an all-black church and someone was doing something like that, how would you feel? It made me feel like I wasn't wanted. It made me feel like I wasn't welcome. I felt singled out. So Joshua wasn't barely 3 years old yet, but I went home and I said, honey, do you see what that person was doing when I held you up and I picked you up and I held you over my shoulder? And we talk about it, and I said, sometimes people will accept daddy and not accept mama. Sometimes people will accept you and daddy, but not mama. And I have noticed that some people are comfortable talking with my husband when I am not around. They come and they have conversations with him. But the moment I come and it makes them feel uncomfortable. Oh, hi, Marilyn, and go away. And that would be our only interaction. That's also hurt me. I would go home, ask my husband. I would be up in the night. I would just be worshiping the Lord, focusing my mind. What are you doing, honey? I am praying. I'm focusing on the Lord because that's what kept me through. And my friends of color said, why don't you come to our church? Why don't you come where there are other people of color where you can be encouraged and worship along? And so I would say that I love CSC. I'm here for my family. I'm focusing on the Lord, and I am committed to complete the work that the Lord has for me here. And says, recently I went to Fred Meyer's to shop because I wanted some shirts for Joshua. And so as we were there, I walked in and I got some glances. It was right after the protest in Portland. I got some glances in the parking lot from some people. It's like, okay. And they caught themselves. And I walk in and I had on my mask. And this lady was standing up with, I don't know if it was her husband or her fiance or whoever was with her, but she was standing up. I maintained more than 6 distance, and there were 6 feet, and there were other people standing around us. And as we were standing there, she saw that it was me standing 6 or so feet away from her. She immediately grabbed whatever she had in her hand and went like that. And I just understood, because this happened so many times, to stay focused, don't give any response or reaction, that I've noticed her. And she just kept looking at me like that, and people start looking. I knew that it wasn't because of COVID why this was happening. And I just kept on looking. I decided, let me look at whatever I was looking at. She walked away and walked back. She walked away, stood next to some people. Some people, they weren't wearing masks. I was wearing my mask. She was standing not too far away from people and didn't have that reaction, but her eyes were on me the entire time. And then she came back at me afterwards and get what she wanted, but she just did the same thing again and just watched me until I walked away. You know, this yesterday morning, I woke up and I was talking to my son, and I said, honey, because the world is changing around us, and there are good people and there are bad people, just like there are good black people and there are people who will do evil because of sin. I says, we're going to the beach, but we might not come home. Somebody might come to us and say, you don't belong here, and they might shoot us. It's not because I'm being mean to my son, but I am teaching him what I learned. In coming back from Belize with my husband, and even while I was there, I point out to him areas where people were paying more attention to him than they were to me. And I says, honey, do you notice that you're being served differently because you have more privilege, or people are trained in their mind to respond that way? The stewardess that came and seated me, someone else exchanged my seat with a couple, and then so when I asked them about it, they were saying, oh, those people exchanged this seat with me. They said it was their seat. And so the stewardess had me sit at a different seat, and she was not kind to me the rest of the flight. Whenever she comes to serve something, if I held out my cup or something to her, she'll push my hand away. She'll get the cup from the people that was sitting next to me and put it in the bag or serve them, and then she would take my stuff and walk away. And I just thought to myself, this person is a racist, but it's not enough to hold an argument or bring up something about, because I will get put off the plane. I want to talk about hair, because sometimes I'm in the store and people walk up to me and touch my hair, or they would say some rude comment, at least to me, about, well, what are you doing with your hair now? Oh my God. That's an insult to a black woman. Some of us don't even know to fix our own hair. Not only do we have pigmentation in our skin that we have to deal with, but we need to make sure our hair is straightened to be socially acceptable. We need to make sure our hair is done a certain way. We work hard. It takes me 3 or 4 hours to braid my hair to make it just look presentable for companies that would say, you're accepted or welcome here with braids. If you see a black friend, don't walk up to them and say, what are you doing with your hair now? You have to say to them, nigger, you're not welcome in my society. That's how hurtful it is. You might say, I am not prejudiced. You're welcome here. Absolutely welcome. You're beautiful and you're loved. But why do you do your hair like that? You can say ask, but not ask. The message is just clear. You may join us, but please change to how we do things. Ask black people to behave like white people is not inclusive. I'm not saying this to put down anybody, and that's not my intention. Columbia is going to open up soon in Canby. And I'm wondering how many people of color will come here to this country. They're Hispanics, they're other people of culture. I would like to see other people come and worship with us. How do we, as Christians, at least the Christians, we can make a change because we're representing Christ. How can we change how we're responding to open up so we don't say, Lord, we are the one that's blocking people from coming in? That's my message.
Okay, Marilyn, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate your honesty very, very much. Thank you. I'm going to go with Emil. Are you there? Your turn.
Okay.
10 minutes. Tell us a little bit about your background and share some experiences with us, please.
Sure. So I took some notes. If I'm looking down, that's what I'm looking at. So just to make sure I keep within my time. But what I'm going to probably do is just kind of share a little bit of my life journey and then posit some examples of how racism has touched me, and kind of go about it that way, if that's all right.
Sure.
So a lot of you, I think, have heard my story, but so some of this I might be going back into, but again, it pertains to what we're talking about. But so as Tim mentioned, I was born in Iran, and my dad is Iraqi and my mom is Iranian. And I was the product of a one-night stand. And so racism, in a way, touched me even before I was born, because my grandparents didn't want anything to do with me or my brother. If you don't know, Iran and Iraq, they don't traditionally, historically get along, and those people groups do not care for one another. So we had that going against us, but more so, how my parents came about to bring me into the world is very taboo in our culture. And so I never got to meet my grandparents because they essentially hated us right off the bat in that regard. So in a sense, like I said, it touched me early. And then as a child, when I was, the Shah fell in 1979 in Iran, and the Muslim Republic rose up at that point. And I still remember when I was about 3, faintly, I don't remember it well, but people coming into my parents' home and dragging my father out of our home to be taken to a government facility to try to force convert him to Islam. And my father was picked out because he had a lot of power in the country at the time. And so we were very forcibly persecuted in that way, in a very racial way. And so even again, as a small child, you can't quantify these things. You don't understand these things. Marilyn just shared about Joshua at 3. So imagine just a 3-year-old seeing something like that. And so we had to flee because we were being persecuted, and my dad was scared for his life. He was scared for my mom, for me and my brother, who was just a baby. And so again, racism touched us in that regard, where we were forced out of our home. And that was an anger that my dad died a few months ago, and that was an anger that he carried to his grave. And my mom carries that anger, to Muslims today, to all Muslims. And so just, so I grew up with just this thread of hatred and animosity toward the Iranian government, to Muslims in general. So again, it touched me in that regard. Coming to Canada, I grew up in Canada, and I didn't speak English, obviously, and so I was trying to learn English on the go, and that was really difficult too. When I started, I think I was in 1st or 2nd grade there, where kids would see me and they would just see this child who can't speak English, who doesn't look like them, because I lived in Toronto at the time, and Toronto is a very metropolitan city today, but I think at the time it wasn't as much so as it is today. And so, and there's not a lot of Middle Eastern people there. It was mainly a white school, but there were a few other ethnicities. But and so I was picked on a lot. People would laugh at me, not talk to me, simply because I was different, and simply also because I didn't speak English, and they just thought that was weird, and so it was really difficult at that point as well for me growing up. The next part of the story is when I got a little bit older, I got into gangs as a young person when I was 16, and I bring that point up because as I was growing up, I started to read a lot about my background and trying to understand why we had to leave, what was happening. And I came to the conclusion that I blamed white America, that I blamed the US government for not stepping in and helping the Shah and allowing things to unravel in the ways that they did. And so I share that story because I feel when I think of racism, I'm both a victim of it, but also an assailant of it, in the sense that I started to develop a deep hatred for white people in general, that I just blamed them all for my problems, my parents' problems, that the reason we weren't in the country that we felt most comfortable being was because of white America, and because they had the power and the ability to step in. And so as a young person, when we would fight, because there was a lot of fighting that went on in my life as a young person, I was thrilled to fight anyone that was white, because it was just all of this anger that I couldn't deal with in a healthy way. And the only way that I could deal with it was by unleashing it on somebody who was white. And whether they, beat me up or I beat them up, or it was a little bit of both, it just gave me such a thrill to be able to just unleash all of this anger and this pain that I was carrying within me. And, and even, being involved in that environment, you just heard racial language just being thrown. You just really saw the ugliness of human beings. And I did that as well, obviously. So, but a lot of times when we talk about racism and race, people often talk about, they often say, well, I'm not racist, but, I think that the true nature of our character is when we're angry. If a person of color cuts you off on the road, what's the first thing you're going to think or say to that person, and I've heard that happens a lot to people, that, people will say that. And, but then when they're in a fit of anger or frustration towards someone of color, it's usually racial verbiage that comes out of their mouth. So it's always present and it's always there. And so I experienced that. The next thing, kind of continuing on from there, when I found the Lord, when I was about 21, 22, a lot of that pain, I found a lot of healing. Marilyn kind of shared that a little bit as she was talking about just her encounters with people and how God is the forefront of that. And that's very true for me as well. And just, I really identified with recognizing that God is my Father and I'm loved. And I think a lot of my pain, I share this in my testimony, revolves around just growing up in a family that just was not emotionally focused on me and centered on me. And so finding that in God was huge. And so as I got involved in ministries, I really found an interest in being involved in ministries around racial discrimination. And, I got to work in Watts, Sacramento, New Orleans. I've been a part of ministries in prisons and homeless populations. So I really got to encounter it in so many different ways, just not even outside of my scope. Outside of my scope, which was such a blessing from God for me to experience. But during that time, 9/11 happened. And growing up, now speaking English, you'd I think experience racism in more subtle ways, and I think I'll get to that in the practicality portion. But I really started to hear it again post 9/11. I can't tell you how many times I heard "sand nigger" thrown my way. I can't tell you how many times people would tell me to go back to my country and that I'm a terrorist and that you're not wanted here. People would try to pick fights with me. So experienced a lot of that. I had family begging me to put an American sticker on my car, and almost like this, I have to validate the fact that I live here, which I refused to do. I thought that was ridiculous. But, my parents were really afraid of something happening to me because they knew I went out a lot, conversed with a lot of people, and they were just worried about that. But I think the best example with all of this too is just the airports. I can't tell you how many times, post 9/11, still a little bit today, but especially at that point, my bag got randomly selected, and they would just go through my bag, throw it back in. There were several times I would go to the airport, and when you go through the security checkout line, they'd check me, they'd frisk me, then they take me to the side every time and ask me a bunch of questions related to terrorism, related to Osama bin Laden, related to anything along those lines. And one time I got pulled into a security office, and that was really frustrating because I was on my way to a justice conference in Washington, and I was running late. And so they pulled me in, and the gentleman said, we have reason to believe that you're part of Al Qaeda. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was only saying that because I think he wanted to see. I think he was using that maybe within his training to see if that elicited any type of like nervous response from me. And I just said, that's ridiculous. And that's inexcusable to say that. You have no reason to say that to me. And he was really, upset that I kind of confronted him. And, that was really frustrating. And we ended up talking for a while, and he was trying to get anything out of me. And I said, can I go now? There's nothing here. And they finally let me go, but they were very rude. And so, that was probably the most harshest example in the airport. But again, there was some of the things that I just shared with you. And then
Emil,
yeah.
2 minutes, okay?
2 minutes, yeah.
Okay.
And then just the most recent example is just being in the park. This is what I'll end on. I just was at Malala State Park recently and was just walking my dog. And as I was getting my dog out of the car, there were these 4 white men that were just sitting there. And this was 2 weeks ago. Or 3 weeks ago, and one of them yelled, "Go back to Saudi Arabia." And I wish I did what Marilyn did and just, was more mature about it. But I looked back and I told them where he could go in certain language. And then I went up the hill to Malala State Park, and I turned around and told them again where they could go because I was just so upset. And, I was leaving, and, I was texting a couple of friends about this, and 2 are white and 1 is black. And what was really interesting about the response was my friend who's black felt really bad for me about what happened, but my friends who are white didn't believe me. They thought I was joking. And so that just kind of touched on, again, some of these things that we're talking about regarding race. So those, I'll end on that for me.
All right. Thank you so much, Emil.
Yeah.
And we can see you in the monitors up here in front. So don't do anything you shouldn't do because we're watching. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Okay. Next is Melinda Buckles, and she's just going to do what Marilyn and Emil have done and share a little bit about her background and her story. So Melinda.
I have to start with saying I'm sorry. I'm sorry because I want to talk about something that is deeply personal and very difficult to talk about. I'm thankful that we are doing it here at the church in the house of the Lord because it gives me the courage to talk to you today. My name is Melinda Lett Buckles. I'm married to Ken Buckles. I have 5 children, and he has 2, and we live in Canby. I was born in the Lett family in Atlanta, Georgia in 1958. The last name Lett was the last name of the plantation owner back in the days of slavery and sharecropping. My family fled from rural Georgia to Atlanta, Georgia after being told that my grandmother's best friend's son was lynched. Growing up in Atlanta, my mom never drove a car, and she rode the bus everywhere. And my brother and I would go with her to work a lot of the times when we were young. Going to her work, we would go through downtown Atlanta, and that's where I first saw racism. I couldn't understand white-only water fountains and the colored water fountains here, or the white-only restrooms and the colored restrooms. Because I did not understand, I would question my grandmother and get whipped for asking. I would question my mom and get whipped for asking. So I learned not to ask them questions and just do what I was told. I was 10 years old when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. It was horrible seeing the pain of so many black people in my neighborhood. We were all hurt because a man who was teaching nonviolence was in protest was violently assassinated by a white man. I learned not to question anything because it should not be questioned. Years later, after getting married, I went to live in Germany for 3 years, 6 months, and with 3 kids, 2 boys and 1 girl. It was there that I started to question again. While in Germany, I didn't experience any racism at all, and neither did my family. I learned a second language, German. I worked on the economy and got paid in Deutschmarks at the time. I learned that I was an intelligent and smart woman, and that I didn't have to fear for my children's safety each time they left the house. When I had to return to America, and when I did not ask questions again. I had to be taught time and time again that I was black. Black meaning not smart, black meaning not intelligent, and that I was a woman, a black woman. I learned not to question. And today in 2020, I feel like the time is here, finally here, that I can question the world I now live in. All this because finally, I want people to know what Black lives really means. I'm not here to tell you that you're evil, but to ask for your help. I'm here to talk to you to try to help you understand because too many people don't want to understand. Part of understanding anything, you have to listen with an open mind, and I thank you for listening today. I want you to listen because, unfortunately, the movement, Black Lives Matter, is being questioned because some want to say all lives matter. It hurts me deeply that even today, the lives of Black people do not matter to a lot of white people. Of course, all lives matter, but all lives were not brought to this country against their will and then made to be slaves. And all lives do not have to feel as if there still should be white-only drinking fountains and restrooms. All lives do not have to fear of losing a loved one because of hate. It is now 2020 and not 1960, but we can still see and experience racism and hurt and hatred. Well, I want you to understand that I not only see it, but I also feel it. I want my life to matter. I want my children's lives to matter. Since coming back to America, I have 3 boys now and 2 girls. All 3 of my boys were pulled over by the police on many occasions when they were teenagers and even as adults for no reason. When my boys were of age to drive and hang out with friends, I would worry about them, worrying if they would make it home without being harmed or even killed for being Black. I couldn't relax until they were home safe. I want my son's life to matter. I now have lived in Canby for 14 years and I love it. It's my home. My oldest daughter and my 2 grandkids live here now in Canby as of January. The majority of my experiences have been wonderful, but racism still exists. I've been active in this community the entire time. I found this wonderful church which has given me the power to stand before you and talk today. I want to thank you for that. In conclusion, 2 things I'd like to leave you with. If you want to understand what racism is like, I highly recommend watching the true story, Just Mercy. Also, please watch the documentary, The 13th. They will show you what I could not put into words here today. Finally, people who know me know that I love everybody, as Jesus taught us to do, all of us. Why do you think Jesus left the 99 sheep to go find one? The 99 were safe because one was in trouble and unsafe. Therefore, he had to find the one and bring it back to the love of the flock. As a Black woman, I feel like that one lost sheep. And that lost sheep and those other 99 sheep are shouting, all lives matter. I ask for your understanding so that you can understand that my life matters and that I am an intelligent, smart, Black woman whose Black life matters. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Melinda. Again, Marilyn and Emil. Wow, that's a lot, isn't it? And we want to have a question and answer time right now to be able to ask some questions, and you can text them to me. You'll see my number up on the screen, 503-886-9180, if you have a question you'd like to ask. And I want to start with this question, and any of you three can answer it. Maybe you all want to answer it. But somebody would like to know, could you explain in more detail the difference between individual racism and systemic racism? Does anyone want to tackle that? The difference between individual and systemic racism? I guess not, huh? Emil, you want to tackle that?
I'm thinking about it.
It's a big question. It's a really big question.
I'll give it a shot. I mean, I'd love to hear what others have to say. So I'm just kind of thinking on the fly. I guess when I think of individual racism, it's maybe wrapped up more obviously within like the individual, like some of the examples that I shared are maybe good examples of possibly of individual racism. It's hard because you have to kind of know the mind of the person who's maybe coming towards you. Is it just, are they attacking you as just an individual? Are they attacking maybe your culture or your identity? So I guess that's where it's somewhat difficult for me to answer. And I think when I think of systemic racism, it's obviously like a whole, it's a whole system. I think for me, just as an example, and this might be something we might talk about, I think there's a lot of systemic racism wrapped up in our educational environment here in this country. It's a very broken system because I've just seen it firsthand through a lot of the avenues of ministry that I've been a part of, where maybe for some people who, again, live in Canby, they don't see those things. But if you go into a lot of bigger cities, inner cities, especially, you see the brokenness of the education system. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. I wish I could explain a little bit. I can articulate a little bit better, but that's all I have.
No,
right now,
that's good. Thank you very much. Marilyn?
The best way I can explain it is like this. We each individually have a conviction in our hearts, and we decide whether we will choose to love someone or hate someone, regardless of what we've been taught. And we can decide, well, I don't really like you. It's just because I just don't like you. And you're a Black person and I don't like you, or you're a person of color, or you're Hispanic, or you're Asian and I don't like you. Systemic is more something like, for example, when the people were living here in Portland, and they kind of say, well, okay, we'll have the black people just living in this area and the white people just living in this area. And so people are so used to that to where it just becomes the ordinary. It becomes the ordinary. It's what they do. It's what they don't realize. Well, gee, this is racism. This is a form of racism when I act this way. And so it's just so much a part of life that when they really see it, they recognize, oh my gosh, that is racism and a part of that, and I didn't realize it.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you. Did you want to say anything, Melinda? Yeah, so Marilyn was, just to expand a little bit on that, it's called redlining, take it with Portland, where black people were not allowed to buy homes in white areas, and or black people were not allowed to get loans for a home, or black business owners were denied loans for their business from the banks. That is an example of systemic racism, where it's not just an individual, but it's a system. It's a group that have agreed upon something, and there's prejudice against somebody with a particular color. And all of that's documented. They have the numbers on all of that. And it's a sad part of our history here in our country, our area, but it's not unique to Oregon. It's not unique to Portland at all. But systems can be racist, and as far as the policy and how they operate, and even though the people within them may not even be totally aware of it, but it does happen in that sense. Okay. Another question is these are not easy questions. How can I, as a white person, be complicit in racism and not be aware of it? Can you give me an example of that? Of how I, as a white person, can be complicit in racism? Maybe they're talking about systemic racism, where as a white person I'm participating in racism but may not even be aware of it. Good question. Hard question. But Melinda,
I can go back to the hair thing that Marilyn was saying, that just out of nowhere someone will say something very hurtful, but with a pleasant face. I mean, it's like they think that it's okay to make how can I say that? They come across like a compliment, but it's really not a compliment. The facial expressions are not complimentary, but the words are. So it's like they're saying one thing, but their actions are doing another. And I think your actions will always show your true colors of who you are. And what we need as black people from a lot of white people and other races, I'm not just talking about black people, but other races other than white people, are to be loved, to be heard, to be seen, to know that you really care about us as a person, as Jesus does. So that's what we want as a person, I think.
okay, yeah, that's a good example. Good example. Okay. Excuse me here. Another question, just lost my place here. Another question would be about white fragility. I'm not sure if you're aware of that term. White fragility has entered our vocabulary of late. Could you help me understand better what it is? Are you familiar with the term white fragility? Email?
I don't think so. I think I might have heard that, but not yet. If you have a way to define that.
Yeah, my understanding of white fragility is, and you can help me here, it's the whole idea of what we're doing here, in one sense, of us as white people learning about racism, learning about how it operates in our society individually and systemically, and then feeling somewhat threatened by that, like I'm not that way, or we're not all this way, or I'd never had a slave. I never owned a plantation and beat slaves, so how can I be guilty? And so it's a defensiveness and feeling guilty and trying to shove it away because it's threatening to hear about what our white race have done to people of other color is how I understand white fragility. You probably have had experiences with it, even though maybe you haven't heard that term, but you maybe experienced that when you've talked with white people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Marilyn?
The one thing I can say is that for the Christian person, or for whatever you believe, it's understanding that what's going on is not to condemn you, not to put you down, but to make you aware. We as human, we want to say we never done anything wrong. But if we're a Christian, we know that we all have sinned. We all have sinned. None of us can point the finger at another one. And if we can see that, hey, you know what? Maybe I did not participate in that. My ancestor participate in that. Some of what's going on, I'm participating in it without even realizing I'm participating in it. Lord, help me to be more aware. Help me to be more understanding. Help me to be more compassionate. When I see a person of color that I may not feel is blending into what I expect, help me to be willing to have a mindset of change, to accept who they are, accept their personality, their way, their behavior, and not try to impress mine on them. And it's not going to be an easy process. It's a choice. It's a step by step. But please don't fall into condemnation, because that will not help. Fall into that gap that says, wow, I recognize this. I didn't see it. Or even if you did and you just feel outnumbered, saying in your heart, be willing to change. Be willing to listen. A lot of time, people of color will not say anything because oftentimes we've been told, oh, well, maybe you just misinterpreted it, or maybe you just think it's just wrong. Maybe if you really get to know that person. However, what you've just told them is, I didn't hear you. No, that doesn't happen. You just make it up. Just listening really helps. And so just don't condemn yourself. Be encouraged that you're seeing it. We didn't know what sin was until the law pointed it out to us and say, this is sin. In the same way, we're now being able to say, wow, this is systemic racism. We know what it is. We have the opportunity to repent, to change, to take the right step.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I think change for this country is so multiracial. I mean, the whole country. In fact, if you put all of the multiracial people together, it would be more than what white people are in this country today. So I personally think it goes back to my ancestors being brought here, and I'm being told the stories growing up. They didn't get a chance to be here today, and I think that God is using me to make a difference for now and the future. I haven't had, I guess I don't see a whole lot of hatred, but I do love people a lot, and I think it would be great to receive that love back, unconditional, because that's what God does. He creates all of us unconditionally, and he brings us into this world, and he gives us choices. Sometimes the choices are bad, sometimes they are good, but when it comes to racism, it should be a word that should be probably dismissed, or a feeling, or whatever that is. We're all in this together. We live, we love, and we just want to enjoy life just like anybody else. So I just think that if we take the word of God, knowing that he loves us and he wants us to love each other, we're good. We're good.
Yeah. Amen. Appreciate it. Yeah. Did you want to say anything, Emil?
You don't have to. They said it really well, but just one thing I just was thinking about is, being in ministry as long as I've been, and I've just noticed in this country, often people really struggle with emotional intelligence and learning to just listen well, actively listen well, not speak as much. And I just think that this is a good challenge and a good time, especially in the church, to just be able to listen to the voice of another, be able to listen to a voice that maybe they've either are just not educated around, understanding around, and to just be open-minded to what they have to hear. Because I think a lot of times people think, well, I'm not this or I've not done that, but when you use language like that, it already sounds defensive, to me anyway, and it already sounds like you're not willing to listen. And so instead of using that type of language, to just be able to challenge yourself to just listen. I think Melinda brought up a documentary like The 13th. I just wrote that down. I've heard of it. I haven't seen it. That would be a good example to just sit down and listen and understand the perspective and the mindset of the voice of another that is maybe very different than your own.
Okay, well said by all three of you. We are to listen and to seek to understand, not to become dismissive.
Well, I want to say one thing, that when my husband and I married, there was so many things about my culture that he didn't understand. And it's amazing because now I see your husband saying the same thing. But it's really a whole different culture. Same thing probably for Emil. But the bottom line is we all have red blood. We all breathe, we all love, we all have desires, we have dreams. And if we get together and help each other accomplish all those dreams, we all would be happy. And that's what God wants from us. So, I mean, that's my dream.
Yeah, it's a great dream.
That's my dream.
You said it so well, so well. Okay, I have another question that's come in. These are good questions. This one has to do with when it comes to racial reconciliation and racial justice. That the question is, it's one thing to be reconciled, but isn't there a need beyond reconciliation for justice to take place? Does that make sense? In other words, I think the intent of the question is that racial reconciliation is good and it's a first step, but it's not enough because it doesn't address the injustices, say, within the system or within the culture. And I would just be curious to hear what one or two or three how you would respond to that. The need for justice beyond reconciliation.
Well, I think, again, actions speaks louder than words. Again and again and again, because, again, growing up in Atlanta and hearing that we're not, all people are equal. And then you go with your parents downtown and you see this, okay, colored here. You don't want to go in it because no one's taking care of it. And then you see the whites restrooms here and stuff. So it's more than just, it's there again, it's an action to show that you love and you care and you want to see change. You want us to be the people that God wants us to be. I think it goes back to that again.
Okay.
With what Melinda said, just to piggyback off of that, I agree with that. I think that's a good way to frame it, in the sense of, I think when I talk to people nowadays, especially with everything going on in our country, I often hear like, I need to acknowledge my white privilege. And so I hear people say that a lot. And sometimes for me, it's confusing. And sometimes I go deeper with people, depends on the person and the time, but I don't really know what that means. Like, does it just mean like you just have to tell that to yourself but what comes with that? Is there some actions that come with that? And kind of like what Melinda, and that's sometimes when people share that with me, I'll usually, if I'm in a place and watching where the conversation is flowing, is to challenge them. It's like, okay, well, that's great. And well, what does that mean to you? What actions are you going to take? What steps would that look like? And a lot of times when people don't really know. I think it's almost like they feel like they have to say that, but they don't really even know what that means almost to them. But I don't know if it's just everything kind of going on in our society and our media to acknowledge that, which again, I think is a beautiful thing if you feel you need to do that. But what are some like steps you can take? And, maybe when we get to the practical piece of it, we can talk a little bit more about that as well. But yeah.
Okay, I have one more question, and then we will go to the practical part. In college, our diverse student body brought it to the campus attention, or to the Christians on campus, that they didn't feel necessarily hated, but that they felt more unseen. Eye contact avoided when passed on the sidewalk, sitting alone in the lunchroom, unnoticed in a crowd. Do our panel have any experiences with this?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Could you share a couple?
I can just quickly share. I experience that all the time, and what I mean, like all the time. And so I notice a lot of times when I'm walking with my family or my son, when I walk by people, I never really experience, people will smile, say hello. What I've noticed a lot of times when I'm walking by myself, or especially if I have like my hoodie up, I often will see people crossing the street from me, and all the time. And there's lots of times where I will, walk down the street, smile at someone, make eye contact, and I get nothing. And I think what maybe some of those times people are just in a bad mood. Who knows? I mean, I don't want to judge people, but I've kind of surmised that as I've thought about this some more, is I think it's based off a presupposition on the way that I dress. I dress a certain way that I think elicits this response of like, oh, he's maybe a thug, or he's in a gang, or he's this, or he's that, instead of just acknowledging me as a human. And so that's like one subtle way. And yeah, and there's lots of times when, even at our church where, I'll, be walking by people and I get nothing, so I've experienced that. And again, like, I don't know for sure if that's me or them and they're just in a bad place. I want to be fair to the person, but I experience that quite often. So.
Okay.
I've experienced something similar to that especially when my kids were teenagers. We would go into a grocery store or a department store, a clothing store, and it would be full of people. And all of a sudden, there's one person that's following you, not following anyone else. And can I help you? Well, no, you can't. Mm-hmm. Well, what are you looking for? Why are you questioning me when so many other people are here? Or the kids would say, this lady came behind me and asked me, what am I doing? Or, it's that kind of thing that we need to be more sensitive to. All Black people are people of color are not out to take anything for you. They're just there to get what they need. That's it. That's the only purpose for it. And it just needs to be a little bit sensitive to our needs on that issue.
Yeah. Yeah, the person who asked the question said the answer for the campus was to intentionally see, even to seek out, like what Melinda said about the 99. Mm-hmm. Establish eye contact, smile, notice, engage. Those kinds of things are so important. Well, let's move into the practical things. So I've asked each of you if you could just share some practical ways that we could begin in our lives to address racism and make some kind of difference in our world. So I'll go in reverse order. So we'll start with Melinda, and then we'll go with Marilyn, and then we'll end up with email.
I think that I've actually had I have excellent friends here in Canby. I feel that a lot of people are trying. I feel that some of them are not understanding. And it just goes back to maybe just listening, a smile, or a nod, or something to say you're okay, or yeah, we're together in this. And I think that would be a start. It would be a start because it's hard I understand it's hard for a person who are one way to try to change to be another way. I understand that because that's all you know. So it takes effort for you to step outside of your comfort zone. I feel that here in Canby, I love it. Like I said, it's my home, and I have a lot of friends that are dedicated to me and my family. So the other ones is just taking the time to listen when you see someone different from you. We have every kind of restaurant here in Canby, which means we have every kind of people here in Canby. So we have to be sensitive to everyone's need, and that's a start for us. I'd say we start.
Yeah, something as simple as smiling and establishing eye contact, showing interest, listening. Okay, good. Marilyn.
I would say, I would ask the question back. How would you respond to your friend? How would you respond to somebody that you consider your friend if you see them? How would you respond if you see your child being the only one of a certain color or in a group, a crowd, and you are a person there and but not as their parent? How would you walk over to them and say hi to them and help relieve some of what they might be feeling? Taking practical steps, maybe just a hello, how are you today? The question was asked earlier. I remember several times the way it just become normal to me. I will just get my lunch and go sit at a desk, not looking for anyone to sit with me because it's so normal. And it's just part of that whole systemic too, where we expect the culture to respond to us a certain way. And so I think just reaching out and demonstrating Christ's love, responding to that person how we think Jesus would respond. The other day, my husband says, it's 4th of July, I'll go say hi to my neighbor. Our neighbor is Hispanic and married to a Caucasian. Oh my gosh, that man just bloomed. He cried. He's never had a Caucasian person come to his house and says, let me just sit with you while you have a bear. And just talk with him and listen to him. And men of color right now, they feel so beaten down. They feel disrespected, unloved. When people say, if the cops says, hold up your hand, you hold up your hand, it might not be that way for a person of color. They get handcuffed, they get shoved down to the ground, they get shoved up against the vehicle. It's a different handling and a process. And to just block a person or say, okay, well, you don't understand because of this, it's just, I don't know. May God help us. We're all trying, and this is very difficult for all of us. And I just appreciate the people who are willing to try and the people who are willing to want to listen. Because when somebody just blocks us, it makes us know that we don't trust you to share even how we're feeling. It's like a little child being raped, and then you go to your mom, and then instead of your mom helping you and talking with you through it, they lash out at you, they beat you, they send you to your room. How would that child ever go back and say something else? It's very painful. I call my brothers every day to see how they're doing, how they're treated at work. Sometimes, I'll give you an example, I have the same degree as my coworker. They're titled staff accountant. Some of them come to me and ask me work, and I says, well, I'm just an ASB specialist. I don't do accounts payable, but I oversee the whole thing from beginning to end. Their salary is $10 more than mine per hour. There's so many injustice on so many levels that is going unseen, and we smile. We're grateful because our relationship is with the Lord. And we go on and we do life because we want to please Jesus. I want to hear God's voice. That's my joy. So thank you for being willing to just listen or even say hello or hi or welcome. That's just little simple things.
Yeah.
Can I say one thing about
Yes.
what she just said? When the news came out and they were showing over and over and over the knee thing, and the guy that walked into the home that was not, all the killings, I had one of my daughters to call, and she was just bawling, and she said, I don't like being Black right now. And it really, really hurt to hear that. Yeah. Because I think that whoever God made you, you have to embrace that. And it's unfortunate that this has happened for so long with our culture that I have to have any young kid, anyone that has a thought, a feeling of not being loved and not being wanted. I think it's important that we embrace everyone in that way.
Amen. Email.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. Sorry, that was what Melinda, you just shared, just kind of shook me up a little bit. So just hearing that, so I'm sorry to hear that about her. I guess for me, just a couple of things is, we've talked a little bit about this, but just maybe challenging yourself. A practical step you can take is engaging with someone outside of your race, your culture. I can't tell you how much music and food and dance and other things, literature that I've been introduced to someone who's outside of my scope, my culture, my heritage, and I can't speak to that enough. I remember when I did ministry in Watts, and I was doing a ministry with blood gang members. How does a Middle Eastern person engage with a blood gang member? Well, I have a deep love for hip hop, and so we would talk a lot about like Tupac and Biggie Smalls and different songs and what we think the artist is talking about. And it just led to other aspects of really good conversation about the Lord, about our families. And it just became, it wasn't then a Middle Eastern person and a Black person. It was just two human beings talking. And so to just be able to step outside of your comfort zone and talk to someone who's different than you, and then challenging yourself to maybe get interested in their music, their foods, but because that's a great way to build common ground with people. The other thing I had was just watch your language and your presuppositions. We talked a little bit about that, but I can't tell you how many times people will come up and say, you people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, about, people from the Middle East. And I know what they're saying. They don't mean it obviously in a insidious way, but it comes across that I'm different than you. I'm beneath you, or whatever. When you hear that phrase, you people, sometimes people will say, when did you convert from Islam? Again, this assumption that people from the Middle East are all Muslims, and that is not true at all. And just being careful of that. And, another one I get is, you seem educated, you speak in an eloquent way. And I want to say, I want to take that as a pure statement, but you hear that so many times now that you start to think like, do they think I should not be this smart? And again, I think a lot of that might come away from me anyway, just personally, again, the way that I dress. Just being really careful about your presuppositions in your language, because for you it might just be language, but for me or for us, we hear it so many times that it just takes on more of a negative tone. So those are just some examples I wanted to share.
Okay, thank you very much. There's so much more we could say, right? So much more we could talk about, and this is just a beginning. And again, going back to the arc of racial justice, this is the A for awareness, and the R is relationship, and the C is for commitment to make change. But hopefully all of us who participated in this today have had our awareness increased, and that we've listened and that we can understand better and try to see the world from another person or person's perspective, walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak. And I hope it's been beneficial for us. I hope it makes a difference in our community and out beyond that. And again, I just want to say a heartfelt thanks to Melinda and to Marilyn and to Emil for being open and honest and vulnerable with your lives. You know, these live streams they're just kind of weird because we're here in an empty building basically with just a few people, but you know, on the other end of the live stream are several hundred people, you know, who will be watching this and becoming a part of it that we don't even see here. So I hope and pray the impact will be wide and will be long. So I would like to close this in prayer. Father God, we are all your children, no matter what color our skin, no matter where we were born, no matter who our families have been. And you created all of us equal in the image and likeness of you, Father. And when we get to the end, when we get to the new heavens and the new earth, it's going to be a multi-international, multi-racial community of people where all of us will be one, all of us will be equal. All of us will be loved by you with no bias, no prejudice. And Lord, I pray that that vision would guide us and lead us now in this fallen, fractured world we live in. Help each one of us to be a beam of light, to be an eyes and mouths and hands of love, unconditional love, no matter what color of skin. Help us to go from this today, change people, and pray that it would make a difference in the little small worlds that we live in. And again, I just pray for Melinda and her family. I pray for Marilyn and her family, Emil and his family, what they face on a daily basis that those of us who are part of the majority culture just really don't know anything about. I pray, Father, for joy in their journey. I pray for joyful perseverance. I pray that you would give them strength. And Lord, I pray that you would bring people across their paths who would see them as just people made in the image and likeness of God, and see beyond whatever prejudice or racial intent might be there. Help us to love one another as you love us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thanks again to those of you who participated and to all of you who watched. Pass the news on. This is recorded. It's going to be available on our website to watch. And again, thank you for coming. God bless. Thanks, Emil.
Thank you.
And we hope you have a good day. All right.